I decided that I was going to make some more dragon eye pendants. I've been doing this for a while. I've done different ones that are necklace pendants and pins. As you can see, I've done many different styles and colors. I usually use glass cabochons for these. I hand paint all of them, and then I use Sculpey or Sculpey III to do the area around the eye. This is a model of a tuatara eye, which is a native reptile in the country I live in. This is a glass cabochon that I painted before. The other one laying on the mat and this other one that I'm holding are also glass. I just use acrylic paint on the back, different mica powders for some shine, stuff like that. This is comparing two different kinds of cabochons. The one on the right is a resin cabochon that I cast myself. It's a polyurethane resin. I tend to use the glass cabochons for this particular kind of project mainly because they're not as deep, so the magnification isn't as strong, and it means that I don't have to use as much clay to embed it into. Here I am just using acrylic paints. These are cheap acrylic paints. I've gotten them at the dollar store. It's a usual pack that I buy. I think there's about 12 colors in it for maybe $4. I use it on loads of different projects, for minis, for jewelry, crafting, anything really. So I'm just using my rubber dental tool because it has a really fine point tip at the end, and I'm trying to make little tiny lines for the eye. If you look close at pictures of irises, you'll see that eyes naturally have this. Here I am reviewing what kind of mica powders I'll use. I have a load of different kinds. Some are just neon, some are glow in the dark, some are shimmery. I did end up going in the end with a shimmery one. This brand is just called Born Pretty. I believe it's also used for makeup. The one I went with is a silver. This is Color Shift paint. These again are acrylic paints. These are really neat. This one's called Purple Flash. I was using different shimmering effects to try and make the eye look really, really shiny. I like when the eye itself is very flashy. This isn't zoomed in great, but you get the idea that it's got a lot of reflection and different colors going on. So the cabochon paint has dried and it's now finally time to sculpt. I'm using a blue Sculpey I. It's a little bit crumbly, just have to condition it with your fingers. Once you've conditioned it and it's easy to manipulate, I actually, even though I punched this flat, I do have a pasta machine that I use to roll clays flat when I need a really consistent thickness, which is good for backers on any kind of pendant or pin. I'm using the ball end of one of my sculpting tools. I have loads of different kinds of sculpting tools. The majority that I use with Sculpey are those light blue ones that have the white different kinds of tips. Those are actually silicone tips. And then on the other end, it's a metal ball stylus. Each of those is a different size, slightly different shape as well. So I can do lots of different effects and textures with them. Just using my fingers, favorite tool, to try and mold the clay into shapes that I want. I know that I want this to be an ice dragon. Dragons, obviously, lots of spikes come to mind. So I decided that I wanted to have a very horned look above the eye, and eventually I'm going to add some ice to it. Using the sculpting tool to just press the clay in really well, make sure that it's adhered strongly. When it's soft and malleable to the touch, you don't really need anything extra to make the clay stick to itself. It just does it on its own. You just have to make sure you press it well. So I'm doing a lot of that kind of fiddling around with the tool to make sure that it got strong contact. Here I'm just changing the shape of the eye a little bit. Sometimes once you actually add the bits on top, you realize that the overall shape needs to be changed, and with polymer clay it's super easy to do. Because it's still workable until you bake it, it's awesome for just making last second changes. You can pretty much do anything you need at all until you bake it, and then you move into the realm of having to use sandpaper and actually grind off what you don't want, and even that can be really tricky because it can get brittle after it's been baked. I'm ready to peel it up, just using this wooden handled sculpting tool to pry up the piece. Sometimes when you do this, you'll nick the back a little bit. I'm just smoothing out the edge with my finger, and I add a tiny bit of clay to the back to fill in a little bit of a dent that I made with the tool when I was prying it up. You don't have to do it because the pin back's going to go on there, but I just think it looks better and probably makes it a little bit more sturdy than having pits in the back. And I'm pressing the edge of the original flat piece in so that it matches each of the spikes. Now I'm just putting some backing behind the spikes to try and beef them up, make them thick and strong. I wouldn't want someone to be wearing this and bump into something and have the spike just snap right off because I've made it too thin. So that's usually why I'll reinforce things like that. Adding some details around the eye. This step is really important if you're doing eyes. Eyes have a lot of wrinkles, creases, textures all around them, so it helps a lot to make an eye look more realistic when you add things like eyelids, wet lines, wrinkles, that kind of stuff. Little worms of clay, like these that I'm making now, are perfect for that kind of effect, and you'll see once they go on, it looks like a lidded eye. It makes it look way more realistic than it did before. It's a super easy technique and little trick to get your eyes to look way more realistic. So this is some translucent Sculpey. I'm just mixing that same mica powder I used in the iris into it. I'm trying to make a very sparkly sort of ice look. I end up having to do way more to it to get the look I'm going for, but I was experimenting. I hadn't actually added mica to translucent clay before, so I figured it was worth a shot. So because it's translucent, once it bakes, the mica will show up better than it does when it's unbaked because it looks very white right now. But when you bake it, it'll become a little bit more clear. I'm just decided that I was going to add little spikes, dots, little details. Again, going for that like ice shard look. This sculpting tool has a 45-degree angle on it and is quite pointy, so it was really good for pressing in the clay and giving it sort of a spiky texture that I really liked. It made it feel like it was in an ice storm and the ice had gotten caught on the front of the spikes. I'm just making the little ice shard spikes on the bottom of the eye stick out more and make sure that they're pressed in really well so they don't have any chance of just falling off. So now I'm trying to texture the blue clay because I want it to look like scales and horns. So I'm just pressing little lines in all over, little dots as well, to try and give it a scale texture look. I decided the bits above the eye are more like horns, so that's why I'm just pressing in essentially straight lines. Also, anything that has skin, thinking of, lizards or the idea of dragons, they're going to have scratches and wrinkles. So the rubber dental tool has a texture on the handle that I actually really like for scales. It's kind of a cross-hatch diamond pattern, so I tend to press that into skin. It's like an easy scale effect. So this is it all baked. You can see the blue's gotten a little bit darker, and you can probably tell that the translucent looks more translucent. Just doing a wet wash on the whole piece with an acrylic. So the idea with this was that it would sink into all of the deep details that I pressed in earlier. Because I really want it to look like ice, I thought that a light blue would look really good and make those little details pop. I didn't want to go with black. I tend to do black a lot, and I just felt like if it's ice, it's not going to have that really dark color to it. So I was experimenting a little bit here because most of my washes are dark browns and blacks because I'm making things that are fine to either be dirty or a shadow would make more sense. But with this, ice was my idea. So again, I'm using that same mica powder, but this time I've wet my brush a little bit. I'm dipping it straight into the mica powder, and I'm putting the mica powder directly on all of the bits that I wanted to be iced. Again, a little tricky to see, but it really makes it glow a lot more. This is a white dry brush, again, acrylic paint. I put a little bit of white paint on the brush, I rub it off on a paper towel for a few seconds, and then I rub that little bit of dry paint all over the whole piece. This makes the opposite of what happened with the white wet brush effect occur, where it's going to actually just sit on the very topmost bit of texture, and it really makes everything pop. I'm just cleaning off the eye here. It had some paint on it, so I was just cleaning it up while I can. This is E6000 glue I'm using. It's a common jeweler's glue. You can get it at most craft stores. And I've got a brass back pin for it, just placing it on there. It dries super fast and it's really strong. It's really good stuff. I do recommend it. Mod Podge High Gloss. I'm going to use this on all the icy bits to not only make it look reflective and icy, but also to seal in all of that mica powder that I put on. It's going to boost the shine a lot. It's going to make sure that the mica powder stays on. Because I only used water when I applied the mica powder, you could technically, well, eventually it will wipe off the longer you hold it or touch it or rub it against things. So using Mod Podge is a great way to seal it in. I just wanted to use the high gloss because it went with the ice theme. And here she is. See that awesome sparkle from the mica powder? It totally looks like ice. It's awesome. I was really happy with how this came out. I was worried halfway through that I wasn't going to like it, but it's definitely a cool one. And I liked that I did the eye purple and yellow. Purple and yellow go well together. It goes well with blue as well. I was a little worried that it would be too similar because I didn't know how all the different mica powders and stuff would work out, but I think it did really well. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. For more videos watching me create different art, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks!